The 6-Day War really shocked the Arab world. They had lost all the territory, and everybody wanted to fight back. So we know what Sadat did. We know what Hafiz tried to do. We know what the Jordanians tried to do. King Faisal took another route. He decided that he was going to utilize his oil as a tool against America and against Israel to punish them. So in 1972, the Arab oil producing companies, or the oil producing organization began to work towards a boycott, a general boycott. And Saudi Arabia at the time was actually not a majority holder of the oil reserves. So in 72 they began to negotiate so they can have a stake of 25%. Later on, through slow progression and also very careful steps, they were able to own 100% of Aramco, what became Aramco, Saudi Aramco. So they began to work for autonomy, to control their own economy, their own resources, okay, from 72. However, in 73, and this was the same year as, again, as we mentioned, the October War, so in the same year as when Sadat launches in September his October War, Saudi Arabia, as a retaliation because the US came in and supported Israel. Egypt and Syria and Jordan were actually progressing well in Egypt to recover this territory. So the US came and helped Israel and turned everything around. So King Faisal was very upset and decided to use his oil to punish America and any ally of Israel. So he began by reducing the output and increasing the prices, and this sent the economy in the West upside down. The price of oil went up immediately, and there was a scramble. There was a mad scramble. So you have Henry Kissinger here, who was now scrambling across the Middle East to speak to everyone. He went to speak to King Faisal. This is @𝗖𝗢𝗎𝗓. He was an oil finance minister, who was the brains behind the operations during the oil embargo. And at that time, you could see the OPEC members, the Arab especially members, would meet and greet and smile because they knew we hit them where it hurts in the pocket. Right? The Americans were not happy at all. In fact, they tried to invade Saudi Arabia. This came out later on in intelligence documents. They tried to invade Saudi Arabia by force. If this continued any longer, they would have invaded Saudi Arabia. Okay? That was part of the operation. It didn't get that far. So 2 years following the oil embargo, Time magazine names King Faisal as Man of the Year in January. And by March 75, he's assassinated by a nephew who's returning from the US, who shoots him at point blank range in his neck, in his heart, in his face, kills him. Now, I don't take it for granted that this, for me, is a dog whistle. The Americans were kind of teasing King Faisal. This is my interpretation of it. By putting his face as Man of the Year, it's almost like saying this guy's gonna die. It's mocking. It's a mockery of King Faisal. He's gonna die. So they put his face all over the world. Man of the Year, Man of the Year, for what he did in 73 against them. Conveniently enough, 2 months later, he's killed. So there are people who still celebrate this as Man of the Year. Look at it in context. Look at when this publication came out. And look at what happened to him 2 months later. They were just mocking him. They had him on the hit list. I believe, it's not a conspiracy, it was an American hit. I believe that. I believe it wholeheartedly. Yes, his nephew did it, but I believe it was an American hit to punish King Faisal and to send a message loud and clear: you do not go against American interests. You do not go against American interests. So he dies in 75. You will see in the interviews where Henry Kissinger, and by the way, before he dies, he makes a very, 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 very bad decision. It's something that the only thing I could ever say King Faisal made a bad decision in, and I don't agree with him, is this one decision he makes before he dies. And that is the petrodollar deal. It's a tremendous error. I don't even know to this day how 𝗖𝗢𝗎𝗓𝗔, despite his genius, was able to let that one slip by. Okay, so the Americans, being the crafty people that they are, they managed to trick King Faisal and the entire Saudi establishment. Kissinger is the one who goes and delivers that message and gets the signature. A tremendous error to punish and to ensure that this never ever happens again. Yeah.
As an oil weapon is far more greater than what we did. What we did is nothing at all. I think we can cut down production to, let's say, 20%. Instead of 25%, it will be 80%. You think Europe or Japan or the United States can survive with this? Maybe the United States, they have their own local supply. They are in a much better position than Europe and Japan. But I don't know to what extent Europe and Japan will get together and join the Americans in any kind of measures, because your whole economy will definitely collapse all of a sudden. If the Americans are thinking of a military action, this is also another possibility. But then this is a suicide.
What happens if the U.S. resorts to force and occupies the...
So he says, this oil embargo is more effective than anything we've done before. This battle is far more effective than the others, the military engagement with Israel. This is more effective. He says to him, what if America decides to just seize the oil fields? Because it wasn't known then, but the Americans already signed off on just invading Saudi Arabia anyway. They already planned to invade anyway. But he's saying to him, what if that happens? Now he's mentioning the economy, saying that you'll be completely broke. If we continue this, the economies in the West are completely broke. Now the time the Western media went to another person who was producing oil in the region, the Shah of Iran. If you remember this last session, Unit 9, when they say to him about the Gulf, and he's like, what Gulf? It's the Persian Gulf. They were playing these two against one another. So if you don't provide us oil, we can go to the Shah of Iran to provide us oil. But he was complaining that the oil was being siphoned. The numbers were being played with. There was corruption in the system. So they really, at this point, had America where they wanted them. Yeah? But now it's threatening. What if we come and take it by force? What will you do then?
There are some sensitive areas in the oil fields in Saudi Arabia which will be immediately blown up.
By yourself? By your people?
Of course. And then what will happen is Europe has to live, and Japan, of course, has to live without oil from Saudi Arabia for so many years, because it takes years to repair that. It's not an overnight business. It's not a month or two. Now you can imagine what kind of gambling this could be.
These were people who were alive not long ago, speaking. The same thing happened when they went to King Faisal and said to him, we can just take everything away. Let's take away the technology, what we brought into here, into this nation. Let's take it away if we don't comply. He said, that's fine. In that case, we'll go back to the desert. We came from there, we'll go back there. Those sorts of people can't be controlled and manipulated. The only way to deal with them is to eliminate them. The only way to deal with such a leadership is to eliminate it, which is why they had to kill him. There was no other way around it. Yeah? He said, of course, we're willing to do that. We're willing to blow up the oil supplies and the oil refineries. We're willing to do that because you will be suffering more than we suffer. You will suffer a greater deal. Right? So he was very, very outspoken. May Allah have mercy on him. And these are the sorts of things that we think we are unique in our generation. What if they just stopped the oil? It was already done. It was already done. They crossed that bridge already. But you see what happens when you try to cross that bridge. The Americans would very quickly come and effectively show their fangs. Yeah.
Could you cut your production down to 80% and still survive economically?
Yes, sir. You know what will happen then? The barrel of crude, instead of being sold at, let's say, $3.50 or $4 from Ras Tanura, Saudi Arabia, it will be sold at $15 or $20. As a matter of fact, we'll get more income from a 20% production than from our present level of production. Law of supply and demand.
He was a genius. He was a genius. So he basically studied in the West, a very, very intellectual man. In fact, in the UK, in London, there is the Furqan Heritage Center, Islamic Heritage Center, which he established. He was a very fond admirer of history and adab and literature. You have offices in Turkey, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, and the head office in the UK is just down the road from where I live. So he established that. But he's very clear. He's very clear in how he speaks and is very direct in these subtle hints that they're trying to threaten him with. But long gone are the days when people could speak this way. Long gone are those days. Now we have different types of spokespeople. That is to say, nothing is new in the world. Don't think that your solutions are new and radical. It's been done before. Don't dismiss the efforts of those who preceded you. Don't think that you're the most righteous, the most intelligent, the most enthusiastic for Islam. Others have already tried. Others have already tried. We have to learn from their mistakes and try to push forward from there. So here, we're going to get to the other side, the Americans. So this is John Perkins. I always mention his book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He's been speaking for a long time now. He's written various editions of the book. If you don't have it, you need to have it. He's going to tell you about the Americans and the petrodollar. Very important. What they did, because after that attempt was made to cripple the Western economy of oil, the Americans vowed never to allow that to happen again. And they found an ingenious way to make sure that even if the Saudis try it again, they will not be successful. So look at the way they've done it. And I want you to think about Saudi Arabia today and its economy and what it's importing and link it to what he's saying. Yeah? There's a full circle moment at this point. Link it to what he's saying. This is perhaps 10 years ago. Yeah? Very interesting stuff.
In the early 70s, OPEC didn't like what we were doing in Israel. Same old story. And so they cut off our oil supplies. So some of you will remember these long lines at the gas stations. And we feared we were going to have another depression like the 1929 depression. And so the U.S. Treasury Department came to me and other economic hitmen and said, listen, you know, we can't allow OPEC to blackmail us anymore. You guys got to come up with a plan so this will never happen again. We knew that that plan had to involve Saudi Arabia because it had more oil than anybody else, and it also, the House of Saud, the royal family, was corrupt and corruptible. The long version is explained in the book, but the short version of what we did, the deal we finally struck with the House of Saud, was a deal whereby they would return almost all the money they made from selling oil to the United States, invested in U.S. government securities. The U.S. Treasury Department would use the interest from those securities, which over the years has amounted to trillions of dollars, to hire U.S. companies to westernize Saudi Arabia, build
Let's just stop for a minute and listen to what he just said. We are going to tie the trade of oil to the dollar. We don't own the oil, but we have to make a way so that whoever buys oil has to use the dollar, our currency, to buy the oil. So Saudi Arabia can sell as much oil as they like. That's up to them. At the end of the day, it will be done in US dollars. They will then take the revenues from the oil sales and deposit it in our bank accounts. We won't touch the money, but we will generate trillions of dollars in interest as a result of them depositing their oil dollars into our account. We make interest for nothing. We haven't produced anything. We haven't been involved in any investments. We are just skimming off the cream, trillions. Furthermore, when Saudi does come along and say, we want to develop Saudi Arabia, we want to westernize it, guess who they're going to go to for supplies? To us. They're going to come to us to provide construction companies, technology, arms, security, entertainers. So this financial framework is such a genius. It's almost satanic in the way they've actually worked it out. However Saudi plays it, the dollar always comes back to the American pocket. Whether it's just to deposit the money in the account, which then generates interest, which the Americans skim off and take, or whether it's when Saudi wants to build the economy 2030, they have to go to America. And America charges them for that and builds its own economy on the back of Saudi's dollars. So by linking the sale of oil to the dollar, it makes America almost impervious to any future boycott. But also it connects Saudi's oil reserves to America's dollar, which is completely, it's a genius. It's like a genius way of exploiting someone without them knowing it. And how King Faisal, with all the respect I have for him, and Zaki Yamani fell for that, I don't know. I don't understand how they managed to fall for that. It's the equivalent of me saying, listen, I'm going to print a few Monopoly notes, $1,000 worth of Monopoly notes. I print them. When you sell your products, make sure that you only accept Monopoly notes in exchange for your products. And when you've gathered your revenue at the end of the day, I have a bank, put your money in my bank, right? I want to make profit from the revenues, but also when you're ready to spend your money, I'm going to provide you what you need to stock your shelves up again. So the money is always coming back to me. However you do, whatever you do with the money, whether you leave it in the account to accumulate interest, I take the interest. Or if you want to spend the money, but I'm giving you the products to and the services to exchange for your money, it's coming back to me. So Saudi was effectively hoodwinked. And what we're seeing today in 2030, again, I'm going to offend some people, you're giving money back to the Americans. The entire 2030 project falls within this. The modernization of Saudi Arabia, the westernization of Saudi Arabia, the development of Saudi Arabia. All of those transactions are through dollars, all going back to the American infrastructure and economy. All of these construction sites and companies and consultancies and technology and entertainers are coming out of America. So America's making money on both ends of the supply chain. Absolutely insane. But he continues because there was someone at that time who did not want to do this. There was someone at that time who they were working with, the CIA was working with, who did not want to do this, tie his wealth to the dollar. And we know who that person is. Well, there were 2 or 3 of them. But that person was a dangerous individual. He's speaking at a time when people are not connecting dots. We know what we're doing when it comes to dealing with certain leaders in the Muslim world. And if they go beyond what we've planned for them, if they go outside the box, we have to eliminate them because that's a threat. Recently, I think it was earlier this year, there was a news headline that Saudi Arabia's contract with the petrodollar expires. I received the message and I had to check it because that sounds a bit strange. I don't think the plan was to ever have an expiration date. It doesn't sound like that was a plan. So the headline, Saudi's US dollar deal, petrodollar deal expires after 50 years. Upon a bit of further investigation, the Americans, being as crafty as they are, all they did was say, after 50 years, you can still trade oil, but you can use, for example, Japanese currency, euro, different currencies. You can still take different currencies, and that's okay. You can just go beyond the dollar. So it seems as if they've kind of they've opened the floodgates, and you can sell oil in any currency in the world, no problem. But what they failed to tell you in the article is, when you deposit the money at the end of the day, you have to convert it to dollars. What's the difference? If I sell oil using the Japanese yen or the euro or any other currency, the British pound, you get the impression that, oh, now I can buy oil in any currency. But when I go to deposit my money, the US says I only accept dollars. You need to exchange that currency to the dollar again. So when you deposit the money, it's still dollar. So it's like a smoke screen. It gave the impression that we're no longer doing this, but in reality, it was just a smoke screen. They're very devious, very deceptive, very deceptive. To some degree, you have to actually admire the level of commitment and genius that is required to be this devious and this deceptive, because it goes beyond the average mind. But don't look at countries that are developing as independent and they're developing. No, you are still in the pockets of America.
Welcome to Historyun, the world's leading online learning platform specializing in Islamic history. To discover the Historyun mobile app and participate in regular live and interactive seminars and tune in directly from your handset from anywhere in the world. Enjoy instant access to a growing catalog of on-demand streaming content exclusive to the platform, accessible from a variety of devices including desktops, tablets, and cell phones. Connect instantly with our global community of history enthusiasts via our private community forum. To find out more about our online history programs and resources, visit our website today at www.historyun.com.